Welcome to the Fourth Row Podcast, your source for 2A sports. And now, your hosts, coming to you from the Slim Force Studio, Andy and Benny Hill.
Welcome to the Fourth Row Podcast, the only podcast dedicated solely to 2A sports here in the fantastically still warm summer state of Utah. I'm your host, Andy Hill. I'm here with the coach, Benny Hill, and we're back online after 3 months, I believe.
The entire summer.
Summer hiatus. Mostly took the summer off after baseball was over. We took a little bit of a break, and this year we've decided to fire back up and cover some football action here in the state of Utah, especially with our rural schools.
Usually we're a couple months earlier. This is season 3, officially season 3.
Season 3.
Generally, we're about November 15th when we're starting up, but today we're going to go with, what is it, August 15th? 16th?
August 16th.
A couple months early, but we're excited about it.
Yeah, so our guest tonight, we figured if we are going to start this off, we're going to start with the best in the business that's out there right now. We had huge success in season 1. When we started off, we weren't quite sure what we were doing in season 1. One of the first guys we reached out.
The first guy we reached out to.
First guy Coach Benny reached out to was Coach Travis Black. And I remember he called me that day and he's like, this guy is pumped for his team. And the Broncos went on a run that year, capped off a fantastic state championship year, unbelievable backstory and everything going on. And we developed a huge following over there in Blanding. And because of that, we've kind of stayed close with a lot of people over there. And so a couple weeks ago, I reached out to Coach Black and I said, hey, I need Coach Christensen's phone number. We need to get him on the podcast. So our inaugural football coaching podcast tonight will be with the 2-time state championship, back-to-back state champion, and number 1 ranked San Juan Broncos, Coach Christensen from Blanding. Welcome to the podcast, Coach.
Hey, thank you guys. Thanks for having me. I love the introduction. Thanks for pumping me up right there.
So we're excited. This is the first year we've done football. When we started the podcast, it was really just geared around basketball. That's what we were going to do. Benny's a basketball guy, and we know basketball. There was a lot of history behind the Fourth Row and why we want to do basketball. And then we went into baseball. And over the summer, we said, we need to do football.
Well, the reason why football became such a challenge, why we initially didn't launch into it, was because the split between 1A, 2A, and then even last year you had the 1A 8-man. So we had this, all of our normal basketball 2A teams were spread amongst 3 classifications. The 3 classifications. So we're just like, I don't know, we might not be able to swallow all of that. So we bypassed on it, and then this year we just said we're going to roll with it.
Wow.
Let's just get the ones that and focus on the ones that we know. And San Juan. It's funny to me that San Juan, we can play you in basketball, we can play in the state tournament in baseball, but then football, it's 2 different universes. But because San Juan is such an amazing story, we figured we're going to bridge the gap and make it happen. So we're going to talk football now.
Yeah. Why don't we start off, Coach, mainly because we don't know a whole lot about you. Why don't you give us a little bit of backstory of who you are and maybe how you ended up as the head coach at San Juan High School?
Yeah. So I grew up in Blanding. I'm a San Juan kid. Grew up watching my brothers play football, basketball, baseball. One brother played for a state championship and ended up losing. One brother won a state championship. I knew I always wanted to be a San Juan Bronco. Ended up playing, fortunate enough to play 3 sports here. Got a scholarship to Dixie State. Was there for 3 years, and I went into teaching and coaching. I knew I wanted to be a coach. And at that point in time, I had to make a decision. I knew Coach Monty Lee, the old football coach at San Juan, he was going to retire after the next season. And so I could have taken 21 credits and finished my last college semester and got to student teaching and tried to get his job. I didn't know if anything was for sure, obviously, or I could have played my 4th year of college. And I ended up taking the 21 credits, getting done, Went student taught with Coach Lee, which was basically just taking his teaching job because he just would take a nap in the coach's room while I taught his classes for the whole time. So I got the whole experience and ended up getting, I was lucky enough they hired me as his social studies teacher. I replaced him and head football coach. I was 22 years old. I thought I knew absolutely everything, and I was definitely humbled that first year. We went 4-7, and most of that was my fault because I had no idea. When you're 22, you know it all. I was going to come take over 2A that year, and I got humbled pretty quickly, and I've learned a lot. And so fortunate enough at 29, now we have 2 state championships, and we're hopefully looking for a third. But that's kind of how it happened. It went pretty quick.
Just real back up just a little bit. What kind of football player were you? Position-wise?
I played quarterback at San Juan. So I played receiver for 1 year in our state championship run, and then I was the quarterback my junior and senior year. We ended up taking a semifinal loss to Millard 1 year, and we lost to Manti in the state championship to a 54-yard field goal my senior year in 2012, and still hurt over that. So it's nice to coach because I can kind of get that back. But and then at Dixie, I played wide receiver.
Nice.
So talk a little bit about playing at San Juan High School. I'm assuming you played for Coach Lee back in the day. I don't know him personally, but I understand his legacy. And when you talk about San Juan football, everybody talks about Monty Lee. What was it like playing for Coach Lee?
It was great. I loved playing for Coach Lee, and he taught me so much. And we still obviously just do the same things that he did back when he coached his camps and his culture. We've tried to keep all of that. He is obviously a top-notch coach. I think he won 131 games in his career. Actually, I mean, he was an assistant coach clear back to their first state championship. So he was part of the 6 state championships at San Juan before I got there, and phenomenal coach. And I'm just trying to carry on his legacy. What's crazy about San Juan is I'm the 3rd coach since 1987. So it was Art Burtonshaw from 1987 to 2003. And then Coach Lee was 2003 to 2016. And then now I've taken over for the last 7 years. So yeah, we've had a lot of stability in the coaching realm.
That's impressive. So you talked a little bit about as you transitioned, obviously through high school, you went to the college ranks. You talked about how you came back to Blanding. You were going to change the world and take over 2A football. You go 4-7. What was the biggest lesson that you learned that year as a coach?
To be humble, and you don't know it all. You have all these, you guys know it, right? You were a coach. You got all these people in the crowd that are the best coaches in the world. And
they're all geniuses.
Yeah. And I was one of just a young kid that had left and have learned a little bit from playing college football, and you come back and you have it all down and you don't. And I was humbled in knowing I don't know it all and I have a lot to learn. And so from that point, I just started studying and asking questions. I wasn't going to be prideful anymore. I don't know anything still at this point. I still ask questions, call coaches all the time. Like Mike Bowering from JUAB has been a great resource for me, and Mike Graycheck, who left South Summit, and Coach Lee. And I mean, there's so many of these coaches that I've even played against and it got beat against that I want to learn from them. And that's been the biggest thing, is just continue learning. That's probably the biggest lesson that I learned from that year.
So if I'm understanding the timeline correctly, you did not spend time as an assistant coach coaching high school football. You jumped into the hot seat, the big seat, right from the beginning, which anybody that's been an assistant coach in high school, I would say that's the best gig there is. Once you jump to the big seat, you realize there's a whole lot more. It's a different world when you're one seat up. In basketball, I'm assuming, football, probably the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, just coming from not being an assistant coach, like you said, I was kind of around them in the summer, and I would go to a game here and there.
Sure, yeah.
But nothing like, I mean, when you're over the budget and you're over the bus requests and you're over every single player and their morale, I mean, yeah, it's a whole step. And I didn't know anything about that stuff, right? It was just like, I'm going to call these X's and O's and we're going to start winning games. And that's another lesson I've learned is and X's and O's is nothing, right? It's all about the culture and kind of the tradition that you establish. And so that was another good lesson is, again, just humbled. That came part of that.
What was your philosophy on your assistant coaches as you came in? Obviously, you're a young whippersnapper, 22 years old. You know, you take over at a storied program like it is at San Juan. What was your philosophy coming in with your assistant coaches?
At first, I didn't want to keep the same coaches that Coach Lee had, and that wasn't a shot to any of them. It was just I wanted to start my own program, but I ended up keeping some of those guys and just seeing how it was for a year, and they were great. And the thing was a lot of them coached me, so it's kind of weird for them to, give it over to me, someone who they just coached 4 or 5 years ago. But my philosophy was at first find the people that know football, and we had a couple coaches on the staff that they had left, they've moved town, but like my philosophy has now shifted to find the coaches that know kids. I could teach anybody our system. Be a good person, be good to the kids, make relationships with them. And that's my total philosophy right now on assistant coaches.
You struck a nerve with me because I would say, just by history wise, I coached high school at Gunnison for 10 years, basketball. And I would say the number one thing to do different if I was to go back was build relationships with kids. And I can, this, building relationships with kids, I would spend more time doing that 10 to 1 than I would worrying about what the X's and O's are. Because you get kids that'll buy in, they'll run through a wall for you. You can have talented kids and they can be absolute turds and not win. But building relationships, yeah, spot on. Absolutely.
Hands down. Yeah,
sure. Yeah. So I just last thing on that, I'll speak on that just real quick is I'm total player coach. That's my biggest thing is, and a lot of these old timers, they want to go, you can't be their friend. And I'm not their friend, right? We have a good relationship with each other. I try to connect to them. I try to learn what they're all about. And exactly, I'm not saying I'm perfect by any means, but we have 90 kids out for football this year, and that's 1/4 of our school.
That is
and it's fun, and because I get to learn, get to hang out with those 90 kids all the time, and some of them aren't the greatest athletes in the world. They know that, but they just want to be a part of it, right? And yeah, that's what we try to preach to our assistant coaches: just build relationships. Football should be fun, and let's make it fun.
Right. One thing that Andy and I have talked about for 2 full seasons now on the podcast, and we've interviewed some amazing coaches, some amazing athletes that have won a lot of games, state championships, just very accomplished individuals. And at Gunnison, we've somewhat struggled athletically, I would say, over the years, and especially since we're talking football. We started football when Andy was a
1991.
Junior. Andy was a junior. I was a sophomore. It was the first time we ever had football at Gunnison High School. And I would say Gunnison really hasn't quite figured it out over 30-some years, 35 years, whatever it's been. And we're always amazed at what makes winning teams and winning cultures. And so we were always, every time we talk to a coach like yourself, we're like, what are the, and you mentioned culture. You mentioned the San Juan culture. And we always talk about that. And it always seems simple. Well, let's just fix the culture. Well, how do you fix the culture? I don't know. We're trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
But what is the culture at San Juan? San Juan football, what is your culture?
That's the secret recipe, right? To everything is culture.
What is the secret sauce?
And I get asked that a lot because San Juan football just has such a rich culture, and I'm very lucky, blessed to be able to have that. I think what works for us may not work for others. You know what I mean? This works for us. But again, I go back to the first thing is connections and relationships with the kids. We just make it fun, cool. Like when kids are stretching, I try to challenge my coaches. During stretching, it's not a time to BS with each other. Go BS with the kids. Go learn something about one of them. Make connections with them. Make them feel comfortable. Make them want to be here so they pull more to be here. The other thing is their work ethic. And I know that kind of sounds cliche, but we had a scrimmage today with our younger kids, and our sophomore quarterback just kept saying, I just want to go in the weight room. Like, I didn't play very hard. I just want to go lift today. And Leighton Christian, when they came down and played us last season, their offensive coordinator, he's now the head coach at ALA, he just mentioned, on the drive to Blanding, he goes, no wonder you guys are so good. There's nothing else to do here. And I kind of agreed with him, though. I mean, what they do for fun is they text their buddies and go to the weight room, or they text their buddies and go throw at the football field, or they go shoot hoops, or they go take grounders. I mean, whatever it is, like, sports is how they connect and how they get along, and they know what goes into it. And it seems like a lot of people from Blanding move back to Blanding, and so, like, mothers and fathers are always pushing them, here's what you need to be doing. You need to be going to the weight room. You need to be going and doing these things. And so making it fun and showing them how to work hard, and then just, being a team. I think those are the kind of the big things, and being consistent. I mean, it's just every single day we do that. It's not just going to happen overnight. Those are the big things.
Yeah, one of the things we've noticed about schools over the years, especially what we're going to call rural schools, the traditional 2A schools, is that winning culture breeds a winning culture. So if you start in the fall and you start with the state championship in football, it almost just sets the tone for everybody else. It sets the tone for volleyball. It sets the tone for basketball, for the wrestlers, transitions over to the spring sports. And you see schools who do that. I look at schools like San Juan, Kanab last year. They were in almost every state championship in every sport last year. And it just breeds this culture of winning, and kids buy in and they say, I know I can win because I saw my buddies in football win. And the girls say, yeah, in volleyball I can win, and basketball I can win, and wrestling I can win. The challenge as we see it is you just got to figure out how to start that going.
You got to get it started.
Because what we've seen with certain schools, and Gunnison has struggled with this at certain levels, is you can almost go the opposite way, right? If you start getting down and you have some struggles to get going, that the bad transitions just like the good does. And when you get in some of those cycles, it's very difficult. So we have always been so impressed with schools like San Juan, where it doesn't matter when it is. There's always a winning culture, right? I remember we both coached baseball. We were assistant coaches in baseball, and we had some battles with San Juan. I mean, absolute battles. So we coached 2005 to 2010. San Juan won in 2006, I believe. We had some. They were
great teams. Yeah.
They were just great teams back then. And then we won the state championship back to back in 2007 and 2008. But I remember thinking, man, we loved to play San Juan because it was just hard nosed. And anyway, it's just, I wanted to say that it's so impressive to see schools who can do that year after year, because I know how hard that is to do. Maybe I'll go back to your first season. You go 4-7, coach. What did you do in the off season to get back and get your team back in the winning ways?
So the biggest thing, what we try to do is get them just to buy into our program and what we were doing. And I think the biggest buy-in came from when we explained to them why we do what we do, and when we finally set like a clear vision for what we want to accomplish. The next year wasn't much better. We ended up going, I mean, we were like co-region champs, but we ended up losing to a tough game to Moab at the very end. We went 6-4, and we ended up losing in the quarterfinals to Millard, but we took a step in the right direction. And then they ended up moving us to 3A. And we were the smallest school in 3A. We were with like, Juan Diego, Grantsville, Morgan, Juab. To be honest, numbers wise, we had no business with those guys. If you know Blanding, 50% of our school population comes from, they're bussed in. So they come from the South. And then a lot of those kids can't really participate in sports because they have to get on a bus right after school and then head back home. So numbers wise, we were way lower, but we just had to take it as a challenge. And that was probably the best thing that happened to our program, is moving up to 3A, because our standards were raised so high at that point. So I look back at that, and it was really miserable for a minute. I mean, we went 8-3 and won our region the first year, and then I think 8-4 the next year. But and then we won 2 state championships right after that. And a lot of people say, it's whatever, but it's because you moved down from 3A. You couldn't win in 3A, so you had to come to 2A. And I'll leave that there, because I guess I could say that about other teams moving from 2A to 1A now. But I'll leave that there. Because those guys were kind of the ones that were saying that. But we're now the smallest 2A team, but our standards were raised. I think that was the greatest thing for us, is to move into 3A those years, because we got to see what the Juabs, the Morgans did. Even though we had no business playing with them, our standards were raised.
So see if I understand you correctly here. It was almost as if this is San Juan and our little neck of the woods down in southern Utah against the rest of the world, and we're going to band together and we're going to go battle.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. And I think deep down we knew, against Morgan, who had 50 freshmen or 50 seniors. They graduated like 50 seniors last year. We had like 60 total kids on our team those years. There was no way, I think, toe-to-toe we were going to play against a Morgan. But exactly, we banded together and raised our standards and worked, and it's put us to where we are today.
I'm always impressed. The number, I think I've heard 97. Anyway, 90-plus kids on your roster. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
And I mean,
that's awesome.
That you said that's the bulk of your for boys. How big of a percentage is that? Half of them?
Yeah, I mean, we have 200 boys in the school, so it's just a little under half.
Wow, that's nuts. That's absolutely crazy. I was watching your first game last week against Layton Christian, and I know I get the guy that does all your games from
Pitcher at
Palmer.
Oh yeah.
We got to know him a little bit over basketball, and that's what he was saying. He's like, he panned across your sideline. He's like, there's 90 kids, and I'm like, that is so impressive. Coming from a school, Gunnison's, give or take a little bit, is approximately the same size as San Juan. I think we got 25 guys on our sidelines this year. So to put that in comparison, you can see what a program that wins and has a culture will do. We have the same amount of kids here in Gunnison Valley. We just don't have the same amount of kids on the sideline. So very, very impressive, Coach, what you guys are doing. Let's go to your first state championship season. Talk us through that year, what you did, what was good, what worked.
So yeah, like I said before, after we lost to Juab in the quarterfinals the year before, and we only had 4 seniors that season. And one of them really he played offensive line. He was kind of the only one that played outside of our kicker. So kind of 2 seniors. And after that Juab game, I remember, so it was kind of the same basketball. It was all the same basketball kids that won that state championship. Ladd Ivins, Jensen Grover, Chase Palmer, they made this big text group the day after Juab. And they said, we're not letting this happen again. We were this close because we about upset Juab that year. And this feeling's never going to happen again. And they made a little text group and got guys in the weight room. Every morning they set a goal at 6 a.m, and they were there. I was in there with them because I said, if you guys are going to do it, I'm going to do it. And a lot of our assistant coaches got up at 6 a.m, and we grinded together, and it got tough because they made the state basketball run that year, and they lost to Juab in the state championship. And leading up to that weekend, they were in the weight room every single morning at 6 a.m. because they were getting ready for football the next year. And then they kind of bought into that. Like, this is working for every sport. We ended up playing Desert Hills first that season, a big 4A school. And they were loaded that year. And we got up on them 8-0. And then the depth kind of came into play. We got tired over there on that St. George Heat. And they kind of took it to us there at the end. But that's the last time we lost, was the first game that season. And they just put a run on. All that hard work came together. We battled with Beaver at their place. We ended their 34, 35-game win streak at their place that year. We were doing things that we hadn't done in a long time, and they ended up putting it together that year and ended up taking it home. And these kids under them have just seen that and taken that, and they've just kept it rolling.
We got to meet a lot of those and got to really know a lot of those kids from basketball. Ladd Ivins, we understand they called him the Beast. Is that correct?
The Beast, yeah.
QB1, Mr. Palmer, Jensen Grover, who was an absolute character in basketball. Got to know a lot of those guys. on that basketball team that made that great run. And I know a lot of those kids talked a lot about how that started in football. And you could sense when we really got to meet and know those guys. Of course, there was a lot of backstory with Coach Black passing away, and meant a whole lot to those guys. But you could tell that there was something special about that group. They were different, and they were there. They were all together, and they were just going to make things happen. So very impressive to get to know those guys.
One thing that blew me away when I first called Coach Black, and I just called him out of the blue. I didn't know him from the Man on the Moon, and he just wanted to talk about his team. He was so excited about his players and so excited about what he had coming, because they had, at that point, they dropped from 3A to 2A, so they were obviously the hands-on favorite to win. And normally our experience has been, as we've talked to coaches throughout the years, coaches love to give coach talk, and they love to downplay their teams, and they love to, not jinx their teams. Coach Black was completely unapologetic about how good his players were. And he was unapologetic about, these kids are here to win a state championship. That's just what they're here to do. And sure enough, man, that season was an absolute wild ride. And I can imagine that's probably the same kind of feeling you have this year going into this season is, hey man, we're on 2 straight. We're the favorites to win again. How do you harness that? And how do you talk to your kids about that?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way as Coach Black. I mean, I just don't think I know what you're saying when you downplay and you want to be humble, but at the same time, you got to have a vision, right? And we're going to talk about our vision. And our team motto this year from our seniors is leave a legacy. And they put the E in the legacy, and they put a 3 in there, and they wear that on their shirts for the 3-peat. And we've got some comments from teams in 7-on-7 that's a little bit bold, and good luck and don't jinx yourself. And that's the way we're taking it. We feel like we have a really good football team. We have a really good opportunity to win a 3-peat. We've never done that in San Juan, and so that's kind of the vision we have, is we're going to go 3-peat it, and that's how we're going.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it's that's what you truly believe, and then you want who doesn't want their kids to believe they can win a state championship? That's what I've always found funny about coach talk is, do you not tell your kids they can win a state championship? And if you're telling them that, well, how are you going to tell other people, we're kind of good, we don't know if the things fall together, we might have a chance? BS. Just be proud and teach Absolutely. Your kid. You want to win. If you're going to win and you think you're going to win and that's your goal, that's our goal. We're going to win it.
Yeah.
Just totally as a side note, Coach, I don't know if you know this, but there's been 7 coaches who've won back-to-back football state championships. So we'd love to see you be the 8th.
I would love to see that as well.
I just happened to I was
join that list.
I was looking some stuff up because I was just curious the other day as we were kind of prepping for this. I'm like, I wonder how many guys have won 3 in a row. 7 of them.
7.
So it would be cool to be on that list. And that goes way back to, I don't know how far back the UHSAA records go, back to the 1890s or something like that. So anyway,
how many
impressive.
were 2A?
I would have to go back and look. I am not sure exactly
There's
how many.
There's got to be
probably a 1A.
I know there was the coach, and I need to go back and look at his name from Juan Diego. Did it 2 separate times.
Colosimo.
Yeah.
Yep, he did it twice. I mean, he's got unbelievable records on there. Juan Diego. To me, that's put an asterisk by those guys.
Do you want to dive into 2A right now?
Yeah, let's dive into 2A.
What's your assessment of 2A right now?
2A
football, your competition.
2A football. Again, there's some things that I've read from other coaches in the 1A likes to talk a lot about 2A in football, but maybe I'll leave that one there too. Kanab, Kanab's pretty confident. I don't know. We have a week 10 open. Anyway, we'll leave it. 2A football, I think, is
San Juan v. Kanab. On what week did you say? Anyway, gotcha. Carry on, Coach.
We're week 10, but I think 2A football. Beaver shut 2A football up a little bit last week. They kind of took it to South Summit. I think Emory's good, but Layton Christian is legit. And there was a reason 1A said, they got to move on up. That's a good football team, and I think they're just going to get better. In the handshake line after the game, there was about 10 kids that weren't in uniform that shook our hands they were big boys, and they had just got there a day or two ago. So they didn't play in that game, but I think they're going to be around. So Leighton Christian will be good. Emory, they're turning things around. That Stilson kid from Emory, he's a stud. The bottom of 2A football is a little bit down. I think they're building, but I still think it's going to be tough to win a state championship in 2A.
So you through your run last year in the playoffs, I believe semifinals, your toughest test was Emory. Am I not correct?
Yeah, it was a shootout. We won 56-48. They scored a lot of points, and they were our toughest game.
Tell us a little bit about your matchup with LCA. Obviously, they're the 1A champs. You be the 2A champs. Was that game arranged because it was 1A versus 2A champions, or did you guys get together and say, hey, let's duke it out?
So we made that game with them last year. And so they came to Blanding last season, so we just had to return the favor this season.
Gotcha.
But we did talk to them. They're going to come back to Blanding, even though Coach Stauer said he absolutely hated that ride. But I just told him, look, man, both of us can't find games in the preseason. We both struggled. Like in the preseason, we're playing Leighton Christian. We're going to Juan Diego this week. We have a team from Colorado that we're playing, and then Summit Academy, and then Judge Memorial. So we're playing one charter school, 3 private schools, and a school from Colorado. So we kind of struggled making a schedule. So he did agree because they really had a hard time making a schedule last year. So he said, yeah, that sucked, but I guess we'll go back to Blanding next season.
Nice. Speaking of that, I know one of the challenges always has been when you live out in the southeast corner of the state of Utah, there's lots and lots of travel. Of course, in more rural schools, we're somewhat used to a lot of traveling, but I think Blanding more than anybody, we were looking at basketball season a couple of years ago, and it was unbelievable how many miles they travel. How do you handle that with your guys? Obviously, you got 90 guys, you're getting on a bus, you're driving 6 or 7 hours to go to Leighton Christian to get hyped up for a game. As a coach, what's your philosophy on travel, and how do you handle that with a big team?
That's a good question. Because we are like in the middle of nowhere, we can just say it, right? We live by nobody. Our district allocates quite a bit of money for travel, which I'm very grateful for. We are able to take 2 buses to every single game. For football, we usually have to schedule our games, like we'll play a JV game or a freshman sophomore game right before our varsity game. So we're able to get to these games, like we'll get to Juan Diego about 2:00 because we have a 3:00 kickoff for a game, or Judge Memorial will do that, or Summit Academy will do that. And the big thing that I push with the kids is nutrition, because I really I tell my kids I'm a psychopath. Like I believe in just the littlest, tiniest things make the biggest differences. So when we travel, I'll give them a full out like nutrition itinerary of what you can or can't eat at every single stop. We'll talk about it every Monday in our team meeting, what needs to be eaten. I give them the exact schedule for the week, when we'll leave, when they need to eat, how much water they need to drink, and so on and so forth. So those are and they buy in, luckily. Some kids might be sneaking like a donut in their back pocket or something, but they know that if I see it, they're going to be in trouble. So nutrition's a big thing, sleep, and we take 2 buses, so we have a little bit more room. We get to the locker room early for those CJV games, and the kids just that's when it's their time to visualize. They're supposed to just go lay down and start visualizing how the game will be. So that's kind of how I handle it.
Just an odd logistical question. So you play at LCA last Friday, 7 p.m. or whenever the game started. You don't make the trip home that night, do you?
We got home at 5 a.m.
Oh, yeah. We talked about that. I wonder if they were driving or staying.
Yeah, our bus drivers are awesome. We had to take 3 bus drivers, kind of a floater who could drive when the other guys got tired, and they got us home safely.
Wow. Serious business.
We got to get ready for the next game.
So let's go back. You went. So let's back up. You get through your first state championship. I remember what it's like as an assistant coach who went a state championship. Benny went to a state championship as a basketball coach and got beat by a fantastic Wasatch Academy team years ago.
I remember that game.
Yes.
I remember that game. You were the head coach of that year?
Yes.
So that's when they
Yes.
that's the year that they beat Emory.
So that
in
was
the
my
buzzer
senior
beater and won
year.
the state championship.
And you guys came to Blanding for a
Yes.
preseason game that year, right?
Yes, we did, and you guys smoked us.
I wasn't bringing that up, but you guys had a great run in great run in the playoffs. That should have been your year.
Yeah, that was our era. Yes.
Okay.
We say we were the public 2A champions.
Hey, take it.
So, we had a chance to coach baseball, won a state championship in 2007. We had a fantastic run. We really had one senior that year and a team loaded full of juniors that were hungry. The next year we came back, we were hands down the favorite. From a coaching standpoint, it was probably, from my perspective as an assistant coach, the hardest year I ever had to coach, because now we had this group of juniors who are now seniors. They had won it. Trying to keep them motivated and keep going was a challenge. What kind of challenges did you face as you won your first state championship and then you roll into year number 2? What were the things that were easy, and what things were hard to get back again to a state championship?
So the things that were easy for us is we graduated 20 seniors, because I'm feeling that same thing this year, is that complacency. And this year has been probably already one of the hardest years. Is we have so much expectation on us to do things, and it's a lot of the same kids. And you'll see it on the film of even our last game, how many times some of our studs would miss a tackle or something, they start walking after the play, and it was disheartening to watch a lot of that film. We got 44 points scored on us. So I know exactly where you're coming from with that, because I'm fighting that challenge right now. Last year was easier because we had graduated 20 seniors, and those kids were not projected to do much, right? It was supposed to be the Beaver show. We weren't even picked to win our region. So those kids kind of were hungry because they wanted to prove themselves, because really none of them had played the year before. But now this year we're returning almost everybody, and this year has been really hard because of the complacency. And I feel like I am not even being myself. We talked about those connections and those relationships, and now I just feel like I'm yelling all the time, because we're letting down, and we have so much pressure and so much high expectations, and I don't feel like we're working to that point right now, at least from game 1. I hope we can turn it around game 2.
While we're talking about your team, let's give a shout out. Who do you have on your coaching staff?
Yeah, that's good, because
everyone loves to hear their name.
They're awesome. So my defensive coordinator, he was my best friend. Well, he is my best friend. But growing up, we grew up together. We played football together, basketball together. Bobby Bowering, and so it's nice that I get to coach with my best friend. But when he gave up, he was laughing about it. He said, "You can tell him, even though I gave up 44 points or whatever." But no, that was me. Bobby Bowering's our defensive coordinator. He's awesome. Tad Barton is our offensive line coach, and he was one that had coached me before, and he's done great things with our O-line. A guy by the name of Ryan Palmer, our receivers coach. He's an amazing just person and coach. Anthony Bayless, our lower levels coach. He's kind of prepared all these kids coming up. Sorry, man, I'm drawing a blank. Jesse Grover, he's my only teacher in the school, assistant coach. So he gets asked to do a lot of things, but he's been great with our defensive line. Shane Shumway, he was the old, if you're a BYU fan, he was the old the national championship year. He started corner for that team. So he's been a great DB coach for us. Ricky Eldridge, my father-in-law, that's the only reason he's out. I'm just kidding. He coached me as well. He's a great special teams coach. And then we just have a lot of support with our manager, Bob Cly, and our film guys, Miles and Mike Harrison.
So how many of your guys are San Juan guys?
All of them. Every single one of them.
Hence the San Juan culture.
Yeah. We've rehashed this a lot over the last couple of years. We've talked about this. When you look at programs that are successful, invariably they are filled with guys that are alumni from the school who had success, that understand their own culture, and they come back and they just do the same things over and over and over again. It's almost like it's almost a simple recipe, but it's very difficult for I shouldn't say certain people. It's difficult for some schools to figure that out. You look at the San Juans, you look at Beaver, you look at Kanab, you look at Enterprise. You look at all those guys that have success. They're homegrown guys. They don't have to come in and say, "Hey, what's the culture like in Blanding?" You don't have to teach them that because it's in them. It's a part of them, and it just rolls over. And I heard a lot of the names, and I'm like, these are all Blanding names. Very impressive.
If you don't mind, Coach, tell our listeners a little bit about your team, some of the players that we should all be looking out for, some names that we're going to hear frequently on the radio or the TV broadcast and in the box scores.
Yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to talk about them. Parker Snyder, our quarterback, if you haven't heard of his name, you definitely will. He had a good write-up on him on the Deseret News. They compared him to a mini Aaron Rodgers, Lamar Jackson, which I thought was kind of cool. So he's our returning MVP. Threw for 324 yards last game and ran for 112 and had 7 total touchdowns against Layton Christian. And it's just another Friday night for him. Does things so effortlessly. Our running back, Zach Conway, I personally believe he could be a Division I football player. He ran for 212 yards against Layton Christian last week and had 112 yards receiving with 3 total touchdowns. Just an absolute horse. Our receivers, Keaton Ivins, Brigham Nilsson, Javen Montella, Anthony Doan, Tyler Pearson. I could just keep naming them. They're all dangerous threats, and they're all kind of first-year starters. We kind of graduated all of our receivers last year. That's kind of our youngest position group on the field. Offensive linemen, we don't move anywhere without them. Phenomenal kids. Tag Palmer, Taylor Black, who, again, I think he's a next-level type player. Jared Burke, who just broke about every weightlifting record that San Juan's ever had, which is pretty impressive because we've had some really strong guys come through our school. Right guard, Cooper Palmer, Easton Langston. So some of those guys are all names that you'll hear. That's pretty much our whole starting offense. Our defense, a lot of the same names. But yeah, I mean, Jake Ivins, a lot of these same Blanding names, right? So, but those are kids. But Parker and Zach are the ones that get a lot of the credit, which they deserve. But those offensive linemen, man, those guys we're really good because of them.
Nice. No, it's fun to hear you talk about it. When I watched the game last week, man, it was just run and gun shootout. It was fun to see those guys getting up and down the field, especially against LCA, who, they almost look like a JC team out
That's
there.
what I thought.
They've got some big guys. You talked about, and you've talked about this multiple times, about getting guys in the weight room. How over the years have you developed a culture of hitting the weight room at San Juan High School? We
reward it. We give every kind of reward you can think of for it. We preach it. We always come back to it. Everything we do, we want to center around the weight room. And I tell the kids, it's never going to be 4th down and 50 bench presses. I mean, it's not going to make or break you, but usually the bigger, stronger, faster guy is going to win, and it gives you confidence. I really am a firm believer in games, football games, basketball, any type of sport. I think now every sport's catching on to the weight room pretty big, but football games aren't won now. Football games were won in the winter, those early mornings in the spring, lifting weights, because it just builds that confidence, it builds that strength, and it just builds that mentality. I mean, every battle is won before it's fought. I'm a true believer in that saying, and we just preach it every single step of the way. And now it's just become a thing where if you're not lifting, you're left out.
Yeah, that's one thing I've noticed just physically over the years, going back to even when we coached baseball years and years ago, the kids would always say, "Man, look at those guys. They're massive." And they always were. They were just these guys that were just stacked. And we're like, holy cow, these guys must be in the weight room all the time. Yeah, it sounds like they were in the weight room all the time.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you talking about this and maybe reconfirm this. Weightlifting, yes, does make you stronger, adds confidence, but it's also a bonding amongst kids. where it's not only you spending time on the practice field, but this is another place probably spending more time there than you actually do on the practice field.
Yeah.
Together.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, they have text groups where it's like, that's where we're hanging out. And as long as you're in there picking up weight, just on a Saturday afternoon. I mean, like I went in there on Saturday, my assistant coach texts me Saturday evening and he's like, dude, we got 25 kids in here right now. And I'm like, it's bizarre. And again, there's not a whole lot for them to do. They can't pack up and go to the city, or there's not a lot of things for them to do here. So that's a Saturday night activity, is go hang out with the boys and go lift some weights. And I'm all for it.
Awesome. That's awesome. If you go back, Coach, and one of your high school kids, one of your graduating seniors this year comes to you and says, "Hey, Coach, I want to be a head football coach." What advice would you give to him?
Learn everything you absolutely can, soak everything up, and be humble enough to listen to, anybody that's done it, right? Like somebody who's done it and is battle tested. Absolutely listen and take advice from them and apply it, I guess, in your own way. And that's the other thing is be yourself, be who you are, because I've seen so many coaches come into it and they want to be like this yeller, this enforcer. They try too much to be like this relationship guy, and maybe that's not them, right? And kids see right through that. Is just be who you are and absolutely learn from everybody. Be, have humility in that fact, and that fact is you don't know anything, and soak it up and just be a good person, be you are, and make relationships. And I think if you're willing to do that, you can be pretty dang successful. But the big thing is make relationships in your own way with the kids.
Interesting. I know one of the biggest challenges of being a coach at any level is dealing with parents. As a younger coach, obviously you're coming to the ranks. You're 22 years old now. You're a little bit older, but I'm sure a lot of them still say, "Hey, there's this young kid out coaching our high school team." What's your philosophy on dealing with parents, and how have you learned, or maybe what lessons have you learned over the last 5 years of being a head coach on how to deal with parents?
The biggest thing I've learned with parents is perspective is reality. I mean, their perspective of what's going on literally is their reality. So my big thing is I listen. I mean, I want to listen to them. I'm never going to get in a fight with them because what they're saying is right in their mind, and I'm not going to try to change their mind because they're correct with what they're thinking. I'll have a sit down conversation with them anytime, and I'll tell them, I'm pretty open with their kids, and I'll tell them why we're doing things the way that they're doing. I've had some bad incidences with parents, blow ups, some interesting stories with parents. But the thing is, I always try to remember is that is their perspective and it's reality. And so it makes sense. And so I just try to explain to them to the best of my ability why things are going the way they're going. And if that answer is not good enough, I'm sorry, but that's how I see it. And I understand where you're coming from. So just understanding them. I know it's hard and it gets frustrating, but I don't let too many things hurt my feelings. And so, especially because I'm a parent. I mean, I got little kids right now, but even in their little dance competitions, I'm like, well, why is she not in the front? She, but I'm not going to go ask the coach, you know what I mean? Because that's my reality and she has her own reality. So I get it. I get where they're coming from.
I've experienced that. Wait till you have kids in high school playing high school basketball while you're sitting watching it, and your coaches just watch games from a different perspective. My wife, she's out in the ozone watching everything else, and I'm sitting here watching, offense, defensive breakdown, everything except for the game, really,
Right.
And you're right, because I had the weirdest feeling this year, the past 2 years, is watching stuff that I didn't necessarily agree with. But I had to ask myself, this is probably where parents go and pounce. But then I thought, well, I can't go pounce because if I was the coach, I don't want parents to come do that to me. So it's very interesting when you have kids. You'll find this out when you get older. If you retire from coaching when your kids are there, it's a very different perspective.
Yep.
But it's been very, very good. It's been another big learning perspective for me to see the parent perspective truly is they see things different from the coach. But if I was to go back and coach again, it's been very helpful to step away and look at it from a parent's perspective.
Right. That's true. That is true. And also, last thing with that is winning fixes a lot of things.
Oh yes.
So my worst
winning makes everything better.
Yep, my worst parent blow-ups was when we were struggling. So the last couple of years have been good, knock on wood, but hopefully we just can keep winning.
during that winning streak, was maybe you talk a little about what are some of your favorite moments that you've had since you lost that game at Desert Hills till now? Top 1 or 2 moments that you can think of right off the top of your head.
So obviously the 2 state championships will always take the cake, but going into Beaver when they had that 34 or whatever game winning streak it was, and winning, it was kind of a mud bowl. It was wet and rainy, and we ended up winning 8-0. And like, if you follow San Juan football the last couple of years, I think the least amount of points we've scored is 35 last season, and we only scored 8 in that game. And just ending that streak and seeing the kids, fly off the field, that was almost a better, happier feeling than the state championship. Kids were pumped because we were not picked or were supposed to win that game. That was a fun one. Another one was the Emory game in the semifinals when they about upset us and shut us up. Ending up battling through adversity and coming out on top of that game to punch our ticket to the state championship was another top moment. And then even just last week against Layton Christian, winning 66-43 and seeing our kids gut that out in Ogden, and getting on a 6-hour bus trip home. That was another fun one. So there's been a lot of good moments, but ones off the field, I mean, just having 90 kids on the team, things like that are just cool. And just seeing what kids can do even after they graduate, going on their missions and going to college and doing things. I mean, all of it's just played a big part of it. And it's just been fun.
It's awesome.
I don't know about you, Andy, but we were, like I said, we were a little hesitant about jumping into football, but I'm absolutely pumped. I'm glad that we got you on as our first guest this season. I'm a fan. I really am. I love your confidence. I love the way you speak about your coaches, your players, your culture. I absolutely love it. Love what you're doing. And if you ever have games that are somewhat close, I think we should go to a San Juan football game.
Yeah. What is the closest game you play? What's your schedule look like, Coach, this year?
Oh man, I think we play.
Obviously, you talked about your preseason.
Yeah, preseason we're up in Salt Lake, so that's tough. But we do play in Monroe this year, so that's pretty close, right?
Okay, that's close. Yeah, 45 minutes away from us. Yeah.
Do you play Emory?
We play Emory at home, homecoming. Make a trip to Blanding.
Ooh,
we'll get you a field pad. We got
that would be an abs
for you. We got a polo, whatever you need, man.
We'll
take care of you.
Talking.
Yeah.
It'd be an absolute shootout.
We've definitely got to come see you. I want to just kind of reiterate what Coach Benny said. If I could go back and just to be completely honest, the one team that I absolutely hated when I coached was San Juan. We couldn't stand those guys. Were so good, and the first couple of years they just destroyed us. And I remember when the one year in 2007 we went down to Blandon, we got them, and we went out there like we were the kings of the world. And it was funny because we had this huge rivalry, and then it was once we could finally beat them, it was like we could just be normal with each other, right? But even then, I had this little chip on my shoulder about San Juan. And when we met Coach Black and his team, I'm telling you what, we became huge fans. I'm a huge fan of San Juan High School. We became, me personally, a huge fan of San Juan basketball. We followed those guys all year long. We went down to Enterprise and watched them, saw them play in Parowan, chased them all the way through the state tournament. Got to know those kids, stayed in touch with them, still stay in touch with Coach Black today, text him quite often, follow the kids out on their missions and everything else. And I can see, Coach Christensen, you're in the exact footsteps, not to compare any programs at all, but I can see where this culture comes from. And it just oozes.
It's impressive.
It just oozes out
Amazingly
of you guys.
impressive.
And we had never talked other than text tonight. And I'm like, I want to go. That's why I watched last week. Interesting story. My son that just got home from his mission, he texted me in the middle of the week and said, "Hey, I'm going to do the radio of the Gunnison ALA game." And I'm like, all right. So I tuned into that when he was doing that game on the radio. And then on my phone, I was watching the San Juan game. And I was like, holy cow. I kept seeing Conway, man. Like that guy was like up and down the field. And I'm like, these guys are legit. And I thought, I got to go watch.
We got to go see.
We got to go see San Juan. So one of these days, we'll make sure we bust out our media passes. You might see us on the sideline. We'll sneak in there with our. I do actually have 2 San Juan shirts.
You have some San Juan basketball swag.
Yes, we do. Well, we need to get some football stuff.
Yeah,
too,
you guys got to get some football stuff.
Proudly wear. The one thing, people kind of give me a hard time all the time. Like, hey, how can you guys be on the podcast and say you're a fan of this school? Maybe it's my stage in life. I've got my youngest is 12, and so he's not in high school yet. My other son has graduated, moved on. When you get to this point, you can kind of step back a little bit and just be fans of athletics and kids and teams. And it's kind of fun because you don't get caught up in a lot of the hype. Like we can go and sit with our friends from Enterprise and sit with our friends from San Juan and sit with our friends from Kanab and go to the state tournament and root for teams. And it's just fun because it's no longer about just the school. It's about people. And that's ultimately why we do this. If you follow the podcast, for anybody new listeners out there, really one of the big inspirations to this was Ben's son Jackson that passed away a couple years ago. We wanted to do something to really honor his legacy and keep things going because we saw the impact that he had on people. And so that's why we started with basketball. And our whole goal was to just bring this community together, right? This rural schools, we kind of have this bond together anyway, because there's these guys left out there kind of in the rural areas. And with this podcast, it's broken down those barriers to where we just get to meet and talk to really cool people. And it doesn't matter if they're in Blanding or North Summit or wherever it is. Mm-hmm. We just talk to really cool people and get to meet them and share their stories. And through that, we've become big fans of the people over in Blanding. We have developed some really good friends that are loyal followers over there in Blanding. Yep. So we'd like to welcome you to the family. We appreciate you coming on. I can tell you this: we reach out to a lot of people, and not everybody is excited to come on the podcast. So
that is correct.
When I reached out and I texted Coach Black, I'm like, hey, will Coach Christensen get on? He's like, absolutely. I texted you, man, you fired right back. And I told Benny, I'm like, he's in. Let's do it. So if we're going to do it, we're going to get the best in 2A. So we appreciate you coming on, Coach Christensen, sharing your story and being a part of the Fourth Row.
Yeah, thank you guys. And like I said, I've followed you guys all through basketball, and you guys do it right. You guys don't take shortcuts in it. You guys know what you're talking about. You guys do it because you've lived it as a coach, and so you guys are awesome. And like I said, a lot of people from Blanding do follow you guys, and so yeah, keep doing great work. Coach Benny, I read your story about your son, and it was moving. Very cool, very inspirational stuff. So keep doing that. Keep doing this for Jackson and honoring his legacy. And it was awesome stuff to read and learn about.
Well, thank you. The other thing, just before we let you go here, is I lived the coaching life for many, many years, and I appreciate all the coaches because unless you've been in that seat, you have no idea what coaches go through. On a day-to-day basis, on game day, on after game day, bus trips. No one really gets it unless you've been there. And my hat's off to all coaches. That's why one of the reasons why we do this is to give coaches the recognition that they deserve. Not always does it come. You get a lot of the bad, but coaches, I want to thank you for being another one of those fantastic coaches that is doing it the right way. And I can tell, I love what you're doing just by talking with you. So hats off to you. Another fantastic coach. Like I said, another friend we can add to the mix. And we definitely will get to one of your games. We can meet face to face.
Awesome. Yep. Please do.
And say hello to your players. We know some of them. I think they probably follow us. Probably a lot of them do. I see a lot of them flash across the stories, San Juan football. Tell them we said hello, and go get them. We're rooting for San Juan football.
All right. Thank you. Go Broncos.
Yeah. So again, we appreciate you being on with us, Coach Christensen. We're definitely going to follow you this season. We'll let you know as soon as the podcast is up and live. Like last year, we also, I can't talk. We have an audio version that will jump up, and then we also get these recordings and throw them up on YouTube. They're fun to watch. We've found that the first year we just did recordings, and there's a lot of times there's kind of these pauses or things people are thinking about what to say, and you're like, man, this is really awkward. But when you watch it on YouTube, it all makes sense, and you can see people's emotions and different things. So it's fun. So we'll get those up here in the next little while. We'll let everybody know so you can share them with the folks over there in Blanding.
Real quick, what's your offensive line coach's name?
Tad Barton.
Tad Barton. He's on Twitter. I see him on Twitter quite a bit.
He's pretty active.
So yes, he is. So we'll meet him on the Twitter wire and tell him we said hello, and he just needs to give us a shout out when this comes out.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, again, we appreciate everybody joining us tonight. We especially like to thank the 2-time, hopefully soon to be the 3-time state champion football coach there at San Juan High School, Coach Christensen. So for the coach, Benny Hill, I'm Andy Hill, and for the Fourth Row, we're out.
Thank you for spending your time with the Fourth Row. For more information, visit our website at fourthrowmedia.com or check us out on any of our social media channels.